Welcome back to another episode of Suits and Takes, episode 77 now of the podcast. My name is Domenico Concoli. I'm here alongside Anthony Concoli. Anthony, say what's up.
What's up? 77. 2 sevens, angel numbers right there. Lucky seven. So we're in for a good episode here.
Let's hope. We can only hope. I guess we can only go from that horrible intro that you just gave us.
I mean, if you don't expect anything, you can't get disappointed.
Anyway, on this episode of Suits and Takes, it's just, oh my God, it's just getting worse and worse as we go on.
Like I said, if you have low expectations, you can only go higher than where you started.
All right, so on this episode of Suits and Takes, we're going to talk about the NBA Finals, talk about the Golden State Warriors winning, my Boston Celtics losing. Let's talk a little bit about the Nets drama. KD, Kyrie, a couple years back, Nets were on top of the world, and now the sky is falling, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Rudy Gobert being traded for the haul that he got traded for. We got to talk about Bradley Beal. We got to talk about Dame Lillard. We got to talk about DeJounte Murray. We got to talk about NBA free agency, NBA draft. There's a lot going on. That's just a little insight of what we're going to talk about, so let's get right into it. NBA Finals. Steph Curry, Golden State Warriors, win in 6. Boston Celtics go down. JT, is Casper out there. Missing. The ghost. I don't have much to say. I said if we rewind the pod a little bit back, Golden State Warriors in 6. I stood by my guns. I said the Warriors are a better team. The star power is just there. They have 3 Hall of Fame players on their team, and there you go.
I mean, not much else. I think I said it too. Rewind our predictions. I said Celtics team led by Jaylen Brown as your best player is not going to take you anywhere. And I think that's what ended up happening. Jason Tatum, where's Waldo? No idea. Went MIA. And, that's what kind of folded the team. You needed your best player to show up in big moments, and that didn't happen. So, now Curry has, his 3rd ring? 4th ring? Been his first finals MVP. I mean, he's really just patting down the stats. He's really just cementing his, Hall of Fame legacy. Not GOAT status, but, going up the ranks as one of the greatest players of all time with, adding to this resume. And, I think the narrative of this finals is more so on how great Steph Curry is as a player, career-wise, where is he ranking all time, rather than the shortcomings of Boston. So I think that's kind of what the narrative has been. But we could talk about Boston a little bit here. I think Boston, I've seen a lot of fans on Twitter kind of say like they should make some kind of, rash decision and like make some kind of big move. And, I don't think that's necessarily the move to make. I think I've been a big critic of Boston up until the second half of the season. And, the statistics were there. They statistically were one of the best defensive and offensive teams, I think top 2 in each in the NBA in the second half of the season. Teams that good make the finals, usually win. Unfortunately, they came up 2 games short. But I think you run back the same team here. I mean, you have Jason Tatum, who is a top 10 player in the NBA. At his peak, he's a top 5 potentially player in the NBA at his ceiling. You don't expect him to have 2 series, if you make the finals again next season, you don't expect him to have that kind of showing again if you run it back. And you see this offseason, they're retooling. They're getting some big names. Not big names, but they're getting guys that can fill out the roster pretty nicely without really sacrificing too much of your depth. I mean, you signed Danilo Gallinari, you lose Daniel Tice, but what do you get back in return? You're bolstering the roster a little bit there. So I think those are the kind of moves you need to make. I think, making a rash decision of trading Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart for, I don't know. I mean,
Kevin Durant
may be a different story. I don't know if it gets the deal done with the asking price of that Brooklyn's looking for at the moment. We'll get into that in a little bit, but I don't know what else you do from here. I think you run it back. You had a great season statistically last year. You just came up a little bit short because you had an off series from your best player, and you have to remember he's only 19.
I think if you're the Boston Celtics, you should definitely be concerned going into next year. You in the finals, let's look at the finals run. You played KD, Kyrie. Obviously, things weren't working out there. You played Milwaukee without Chris Middleton. You played Miami when they were banged up a little bit. Tyler Hero missed a few games. The other guys were a little banged up. You made the finals. You played the Warriors. You got beaten 6. You should have went up 3. But it happens. It happens when you a very young team, a team that was very inexperienced, playing against, again, 3 Hall of Famers who won multiple rings together. That core was still together. You even brought Iggy back. You had him there. You had Draymond. You had Clay. You had Steph. I know Iggy didn't play a lot of minutes, but his leadership definitely showed. And if you're Boston Celtics, yeah, you traded for Malcolm Brogdon. You have Danilo Gallinari coming in as a free agent. You didn't really lose much. Daniel Tice played like no minutes in the finals. Aaron Nesmith didn't really play in the finals, and when he did, he didn't play well. He played hard, but he didn't play well. You're going to run it back, but it's, at the same time, it's just like, is this team good enough to compete in the East again like they did last year? I think they can, but I think let's not expect Boston to be the title favorites that many odds makers are making them out to be. I don't know if the team is necessarily good enough to compete at a high level again. I think that they very much got lucky with the draw they had. When I looked at the gauntlet that they had at the start of the playoffs, yeah, they beat these teams, but all these teams were banged up in the East. And when they finally played a fully healthy team, was still missing James Wiseman. They struggled. I'm not saying struggled in terms of playing. They were definitely competing with them, but at the end of the day, they lost the series, and they lost in 6.
I mean, I wouldn't say... To say like they had a weak run through the East, I think is selling them short. I think, yeah, what was happening in Brooklyn was kind of a worst case scenario for the Nets, but you made Kevin Durant look like a joke on the offensive end. Kyrie Irving looked lost on a couple occasions in that series as well, and you know, probably the best duo in the NBA got swept by a young core. You move on to the next round. Yeah, Chris Middleton missed significant time throughout that series, but, you know, Giannis, stud, all-time great. You still handled your business there, and you can't, you know, say what if. I mean, you were given the slate that you were given. Yeah, Chris Middleton missed time. Tyler Hero missed time, but to say that your 6th man as Miami was the reason why you lost the series, I don't know if that's enough to say that, we lost. I don't know. I think that's kind of nitpicking. I think Boston did have a good run there. It was a rigorous run. I mean, you had, the Brooklyn Nets series was 4 games, but they were 4 hard-fought games. It was a good series, even though it was a sweep. You had, Game 7, 2 series in a row, and then you go to 6 in the finals. I mean, that's a tough gauntlet. And the Golden State Warriors are the Golden State Warriors. I mean, yes, you know, you're saying like, you're not. I think you're selling. You're not giving. I think you're giving Golden State too much credit. You're not giving Boston any credit. I mean, Golden State's Golden State.
But again, Robert Williams was hurt throughout the series.
Yeah,
I give them the credit for that. They were able to compete without Robert Williams. Al Horford stepped up huge. Jaylen Brown stepped up big. But again, you just said it. 2 Game 7s. You went to Game 7 with Milwaukee without Chris Middleton. If Chris Middleton's in, is that series different? I believe so.
Well, I think also. And you're saying they're inexperienced. Boston lost a lot of games rather than the other team winning. It's something that I harp on all the time.
But at the same time, if they had Chris Middleton, different things could have been a lot different. That's what I'm saying. If you're Boston, don't just expect to walk into the finals again. And I'm saying that as a Boston Celtics fan.
I wouldn't say last year was a walk into the finals. I think you had 4 series that were tough.
It was definitely easier than it should have been. It was easier than it should have been because you didn't have to play Milwaukee at full strength. You didn't have to play Miami at full strength.
But you can make the argument that Robert Williams was, like you said, missed significant time, so you didn't play Boston at full strength.
But you still played JT, JB, and Smart.
Okay.
That's the Celtics' big 3, and everyone knows that going in.
I know Tyler Hero is like a 6th man of the year, but he's like, are you saying his missing time is like that significant? That they lost the entire series?
Definitely, it's significant. Because Tyler Hero is a starter in many other teams. He's kind of like a 6-man tag they placed on him.
I don't know. I do
know that. I do know Tyler Hero would start in many other teams.
Okay, but let's put it in this perspective, right? Mm-hmm. We both agree that Boston lost games that they should have won, right? Yes. Deep playoff runs serve as a great learning experience for a young team. You get pieces back. Robert Williams comes back to full health. You get Malcolm Brogdon in the trade. You get Danilo Gallinari, a veteran who has playoff experience on that roster. You're getting guys who have an understanding of the game. You run this back with the same group of guys who just made the finals with all that playoff experience. They're not going to make the same mistakes twice. So a lot of those games that were winnable, that they allowed their youth to show and kind of threw the game away, maybe that doesn't happen again in a year too.
I just don't know because you look at Milwaukee. Milwaukee got bounced second round. And look at that. They have all the playoff experience. They have the multiple-time MVP.
Like you said,
they the player of the year, arguably the best player in the NBA in Giannis. And they got bounced by a young, inexperienced playoff team.
Well, I think...
And I went to... let me hold that back. Not young, inexperienced playoff team. I mean, this team has made the Eastern Conference Finals together multiple times.
I said that before.
But I'm saying a team with no title experience at all. And you're saying, maybe they'll run it back next year and be better and whatever. The Bucks ran it back, and they got bounced.
If the Bucks win the finals next year, would you be like, oh, wow, they came out of nowhere?
No.
Because the core is pretty much the same as it was when they won the finals last year.
I mean, they're going to be healthy. Once you get Chris Middleton back, it's like, yeah, let's go. A guy who we've been hating on for most of the podcast, it's like, oh, he was a X factor in that finals. He was an X factor in their success moving forward, and then he got hurt, and look what happened. They struggled. Not only that Game 7, they got pretty much blown out. Let's not forget. It wasn't even close. Could have went to bed at halftime and woke up and been, hey, on to the next one, baby. But that's all I really have to say about the Boston Celtics. I think the Malcolm Brogdon trade, I think it was a good move for them. You got Malcolm Brogdon, a guy who's going to put up a solid number of minutes. Hasn't played a lot, but if he's healthy and when he's healthy, this is a guy that played really well.
I mean, and you don't...
In Milwaukee, he played really well in Indiana. A guy that shoots well.
And you don't need that much from him, honestly.
Well, the play moving forward is him not to start.
Yeah.
Which is honestly solid for the Celtics bench.
You have him and Gallinari coming off the bench.
You could still start Marcus Smart. You have Derek White also coming off the bench. You need a backup center. I don't know who that's going to be moving forward because if you want to start Robin Al, JB, JT, and then Smart, then your bench is going to consist of Malcolm Brogdon, Derek White. You'll have Danilo Gallinari, and you'll have some bigs. So Peyton Pritchard, you also have. So you have players.
Yeah, you're getting depth.
Yeah.
Grant Williams, who had a good playoff run.
Grant Williams is your power forward. You have Luke Cornett. He's a guy they brought back. I know they were looking at Aaron Baines, who was trying to make an NBA comeback after that tragic accident he had at the Olympics.
That I did not know of at all.
I mean, it was very quiet, but it was very serious and almost career-ending.
Yeah.
It was almost like...
He almost became paralyzed.
Yeah, almost life-threatening in a way. But we'll see what the Boston Celtics do. I think they're going to make some moves. I don't think they're done yet. I think the big fish they wanted to get was Bradley Beal, but it was hard to compete when he got the contract that they did because money talks. I think a move that they're still on the table, still on the fence about, is this KD move. I think it's very enticing if you're the Boston Celtics and you're like, we could trade Jaylen Brown, potentially Marcus Smart, and mortgage the future because Brad Stevens has shown he doesn't care about first-round picks. And his time as general manager, he traded first-round picks in back-to-back years for Derek White and Malcolm Brogdon. So I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting to see if KD is available. If the Boston Celtics acquire KD, you have a lineup that consists of KD and JT. I think that any lineup that consists with those two guys can compete for a championship every single year. But then again, I thought KD and Kyrie were going to compete in the East every single year, and they have done nothing. Was it 7 playoff wins in their 3 years?
I think it's less so Kevin Durant, more so his sidekick in Brooklyn, which is where it went wrong. But
well, isn't that what I said when originally? I think we rewind this podcast a couple years back when Kyrie did sign with the Brooklyn Nets. You were on this podcast, and I believe Carmine was also on this podcast, going crazy saying, "Oh, Kyrie's not going to have the same issues he had. He's not going to have the same issues he had in Boston. We're going to get Cleveland Kyrie. That's the Kyrie we're going to get." And I think Kyrie Irving showed up to more Seton Hall games than Brooklyn games.
I was under the impression that, talent talks. Like, at the end of the day, like, if you're just that talented, you can boil yourself to some wins. And I think that kind of showed to an extent.
Yeah.
But when you saw in this finals, in the playoffs, when you had a team that was talented, was very well coached, a cohesive unit against the Brooklyn Nets, who had all the star power in the world, they look like fools. I know I said it was a hard fought series, but we shouldn't be, patting ourselves on the back for a hard fought sweep in the first round. Like, that's embarrassing. When you have an MVP caliber player on your team, someone in Kyrie Irving, who people say should have been on the top 75 NBA players of all time list, who got snubbed. It was embarrassing. And you have Ben Simmons, who was on the bench thinking it was a fashion show and not, playing a minute of basketball.
It's just amazing to me when you look at the Brooklyn Nets. Obviously, again, anytime you get swept in the first round, anytime you get swept at all, it's never really good unless you're going deep into that run. Eastern Conference Final sweep, fine.
Or unless you're like a bottom seed in the East. But the Nets were a bottom seed, but they were a bottom seed for, other reasons. Kevin Durant missed time. Kyrie missed times for...
Ben Simmons didn't play a single game in Brooklyn, and I don't know if he ever will. We'll see about that. But I think this all went downhill when the James Harden trade was made. And I said that. I said, when you traded James Harden, I hated the move for the Brooklyn Nets. Okay, you got some picks, because I guess you were under the assumption that James Harden didn't want to be in Brooklyn. He was going to sign somewhere else in free agency. So you wanted to get some picks back that you traded away for him. So you got 2 first-round picks back. You got Seth Curry. You got Andre Drummond. Andre Drummond's at the door. So you have Seth Curry and Ben Simmons now. What is now? What is going on with that trade? You have first-round picks. Is Ben Simmons ever going to play? He's shown he has more pictures in the gym than he does games played for the Brooklyn Nets. James Harden just took a pay cut to go back to Philly to go compete because that's how badly he wants to win a championship. Well, you're trying to tell me that he couldn't have done that in Brooklyn? You tell me the vibes in Brooklyn were that bad that James Harden saw the ship was sinking before many other people in the NBA did.
Well, what happens behind closed doors, only people behind those doors know what's happening.
I wonder if he knew that KD wanted out. But my question would be...
Or maybe he saw the situation with Kyrie and he said, this is ridiculous.
It's interesting because he left mid-season. He could have left after the season. He could have played out the rest of the season, but he was like, no, get me out there now. And to go to Philly, and he wanted to play with Joel Embiid. James Harden's had success with big men in his career. Look at Dwight. Look at Clint Capella. Big men galore. It's like him and Russell Westbrook. Go find big men. It's like, all right, let's go. Just rebound. Just sit there and rebound for me. And I think Joel Embiid and James Harden, I'm excited to see what they do next year.
Let's not get it
James Harden's going to be...
Let's not get it twisted. He was okay in Philly. He wasn't fantastic. He had one really good game in the playoffs, and then he was a no-show. Tyrese Maxey showed him up the entire time while he was in Philly. So to say Harden's a game changer, Harden. No, the only issue with this was that in retrospect, the Nets gave up way too much to trade for Harden. If they had not given up as much as they did, if Jared Allen weren't in that trade, for example, and they only traded away Karis LeVert and the picks, I don't think we would be having this conversation. I don't think they gave up too much. You're muted.
I don't think they gave up too much for James Harden. Sorry, I was moving my chair.
If we got what we thought we were getting out of James Harden, I was okay with it. No, but he gave up on the team.
At the time, you didn't know you were getting this James Harden. So at the time, if you told me you could trade Jared Allen, Karis LeVert,
I'm saying in retrospect.
I understand in retrospect, but at the time, it was a trade that any GM in the NBA would have made. Jared Allen was not an all-star. He was a solid NBA player, a solid NBA starter.
Yeah.
Karis LeVert, he was a starter. I would say he was a decent player. He's a decent player. He is what he is now. But I think he was glorified. He was better with the Brooklyn Nets than he has been with the Indiana Pacers.
Yeah.
And I think I think that's been just the facts. So you traded those two guys for James Harden.
Yeah.
And then you also got so it's like, all right, you're fine with that. You had LaMarcus Aldridge, so you're like, all right, we have a big man there. We have Nicholas Claxton, so they want to see what he could do. He's a solid NBA player. So it's like, all right, that's fine. I make that move 100% of the time. 100% of the time.
Yes. But I think where people have an issue is, in retrospect, knowing that James Harden looked like a shell of what he was in Houston, gave up on the team, and then wanted out pretty much the second he steps in the door, you gave up too much. It was kind of a slap in the face when Jared Allen basically makes the All-Star game the same week that James Harden wants out of Brooklyn. It's like, okay, what are we doing here?
I just think that when the James Harden trade went down, my immediate reaction that first night he played in Brooklyn was the Brooklyn Nets are going to win an NBA Finals.
And I thought the same thing.
That was my immediate reaction when the news broke that James Harden was going to be a Brooklyn Net. I said, "There's no way any team in the NBA is going to stop this big three of KD, Kyrie, Harden." And how wrong we were.
I think one of the anchors on ESPN said it's probably one of the biggest disappointments, biggest failures in NBA history.
So you have in terms of just Brooklyn Nets history, you have the Paul Pierce KG disaster that was. When you brought in D. Will, you brought in Joe Johnson, you had Paul Pierce, you had KG, and you had Brook Lopez. This is 100 times worse.
Because not one of those guys were a top 10 player in the NBA at the time. You could have made the argument when James Harden got traded, he was a top 10 player in the NBA. Kyrie was a fringe top 10 player. Kevin Durant is a top 5 player in the NBA. All on the same roster. And what? You got a second round exit thanks to Milwaukee. And the thing that sucks is if James Harden maybe played in Houston, conditioned himself in Houston before he came to Brooklyn, if Kyrie conditioned himself, maybe both of them wouldn't have been injured. Maybe we would have beat Milwaukee. Maybe we would have walked to the finals, but we didn't. Kevin Durant almost single-handedly defeated Milwaukee by himself.
I think this decision the statement I just made 100 times worse, it's really going to come down to what they get in return for KD and Kyrie.
So let's get into that because we're kind of like
let's throw out some hypothetical trades and see, is this a trade that's going to be successful for the Brooklyn Nets? Because what it comes down to at the end of the day is you look at that Paul Pierce KG trade, right? You traded all those first round picks for Paul Pierce KG. No one expected the Brooklyn Nets to be that bad when they made that trade. They made a similar trade when they got James Harden. They traded a lot of first round picks. KD, Kyrie won out. What are you bringing back? Are you bringing back assets to compete? Or are you bringing back first round picks for later use? Because you're in a position now that you can't lose. You get nothing out of losing games. And that's a similar situation they were in when they lost and they had the number one pick, they had the number one pick and the number 3 pick the Boston Celtics used to draft Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum.
My take.
No suit.
On record.
No suit.
Play it back in 4 months when the NBA starts off. Kevin Durant is not getting traded. Kevin Durant is going to stay in Brooklyn because it's going to be Kobe Bryant 2.0. Kobe Bryant wanted out of LA. He wanted to trade to Chicago, but then he realized every single player and every single asset in that organization would get exchanged for him. And then he would be playing on one of the worst rosters in basketball, being the best player in the NBA. Kevin Durant would get traded to any team he gets traded to. That roster is going to be completely depleted in terms of actual players and draft capital to a point where no further moves can be made to put players around him unless it's through free agency. If you go to Phoenix and you play with the Suns,
yes,
Sean Marks wants Devin Booker back in return. I know there's the things with Ben Simmons. Mm-hmm. I know we see these hypotheticals with DeAndre Ayton and Bridges.
Yep.
Let's not kid ourselves. Bridges and Ayton, great players. They are not worth Kevin Durant. I don't care how many draft picks you associate with them. They are not worth Kevin Durant.
I fully agree, and we're going to talk about Rudy Gobert. We're going to talk about Rudy Gobert in a second, but I just think that the Brooklyn Nets are in a situation where if KD is that unhappy, they're going to have to trade him.
And I don't know if he is that unhappy.
My question is, if I'm Kevin Durant, if I had to ask Kevin Durant one question, it would be, why are you unhappy in Brooklyn?
Well, the thing
you assembled your own roster. You hired your own coach. You basically ran the team. What is there to be unhappy with? And are you unhappy with the end result? Because that's a personal problem. That's not a problem on the organization. The organization did not fail you in any way. They paid you when you want the contract. They let you rehab. They said a whole year out.
You got $40 million to rehab your Achilles.
They gave you anything you ever wanted. You re-signed with them. You signed a contract extension. Why do you want out now? Is it because Kyrie wants out? And you thought the Kyrie KD situation was going to work out? Do you realize, I can't win by my own? What is the reason behind it?
Or is it because Brooklyn wouldn't want to commit to Kyrie? They gave him a 1-year deal and they were not entertaining a long-term contract with him.
Kyrie, and can you fault Brooklyn for doing that?
You can't. And I think the main focal point of all of Brooklyn's issues falls on the shoulders of Kyrie Irving.
Which is what I said would happen when Kyrie Irving signed with the Brooklyn Nets.
Like someone made a point the other day on ESPN, and I'm not really going to get into like the whole like vaccination thing, but Kyrie Irving made this decision not to get vaccinated going into the season. Andrew Wiggins was in the same boat and ended up not against his wishes, but changed his mind and ended up getting vaccinated. Andrew Wiggins was a great player in the NBA Finals, basically revitalized his career. He turned this whole arc, his whole narrative around him being a potential bust in the NBA to now being a legitimate player, all-star starter in the NBA. Kyrie Irving doesn't get the shot, and he makes the decision to prioritize his personal choice over that of the team. He doesn't play pretty much more than half the games in the NBA. He finally gets to play. He is probably out of shape. He has no, time spent playing with Kevin Durant and James Harden at the time. And then you see it. They're not on the same page, and it becomes a circus when, you actually face good coaching. So I think let's go back even further, because there was a whole time when Kyrie Irving was on a hiatus from the NBA where he was gone for multiple weeks at a time and no one knew where he was.
Like a Dennis Rodman.
Exactly. And it's like, what are you doing? And it's like, I just don't.
But it's something we like. I expect it from Kyrie Irving. Just dealing from Boston, the man publicly stated that he was going to re-sign. And he
did the same thing in Brooklyn. He said, I'm never going to leave my man 7. I'm never going to leave number 7 like that. I made a commitment to him.
Maybe he's not. Maybe they're both going to LA.
Stop it. I think
the best package you're going to get is going to come from the Miami Heat.
Well,
and I think it's going to end up being, because if they really want Bam, they're going to have to move Simmons. And even then,
it's on the table.
Because that's the issue.
Sean Marks said no one is off the table on the roster.
The issue is they can't have Ben Simmons' contract along with
Bam's, Devin Booker's, Zion's.
Those rookie extensions.
Yeah, Trae Young, Luka.
Which is a really kind of dumb rule for the NBA. I guess it's so you don't stack cheaper contracts for a max play.
But they're not cheap. They're super max. They're getting a lot of money.
I don't know if they're necessarily super maxes, but they're just max contracts.
Yeah, but they're getting a lot of money.
I agree, but it's just a weird rule in place. But let's look at Miami Heat. So you look at Tyler Hero, potentially Kyle Lowry. You can't get Bam at this point. You get Duncan Robinson.
But let's ignore the whole Ben Simmons thing.
Yeah. What do you mean ignore? Oh, just get more players. So let's say Ben Simmons is gone.
Let's say they move him to.
Okay, so it's gonna be Bam, Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, potentially Kyle Lowry for Kevin Durant.
I don't know if that's good enough. Your best player.
It's your best package you're gonna get.
I don't think so.
You think Toronto gives you a better package?
I think Golden State gives you the best package.
See, that was what I want to get into. I think Golden State is the prime location for Kevin Durant.
Jordan Poole, Kuminga, James Wiseman, every single pick. Moody, all their picks. You can't turn that off.
And Andrew Wiggins.
The
match salary.
Or you go to New Orleans and you do a trade around Zion, which I think is very.
I don't think it happens.
I don't think
it even comes close. I don't think Kevin Durant wants to go to the Pelicans.
That's the thing. It's like you have to.
I don't know if he wants to go to Toronto because players don't want to play in Toronto. I think Kawhi Leonard didn't even want to really play in Toronto.
I think we'll ignore the outside factors and I guess solely from a player standpoint.
We're saying from what gets you the best package.
I think Golden it's going State, to be New Orleans, and Toronto are the three best offers.
I just don't think New Orleans gives you Zion for Kevin Durant.
I'm saying if
they were willing, you could throw our hypotheticals out there.
Brandon Ingram. I think Brandon Ingram's a solid piece to get back in return too.
You think Brandon Ingram's a better piece to get than Tyler Hero and Bam? I don't think so.
I think Brandon Ingram with someone else. I don't think he can be the only point.
Yeah, but when you say with someone else, who is this someone else you're getting?
I guess they don't have it.
It's you getting Zion,
CJ McCollum.
That's you get Steven Adams.
Yeah.
Is that even worth
Chicago? Because you Zach LaVine, Patrick Williams.
I don't think Chicago even wants it. I don't think Chicago gives you Zach LaVine.
Why not?
I don't think Chicago has even inquired by Kevin Durant.
Every team in the NBA has inquired about Kevin Durant.
I'm sure. They have to do the due diligence.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be the team that's Kevin Durant gets traded for a bag of chips, and you're like, oh, we could have matched that easily.
Well, he's not going to get traded for a bag of chips. You saw the offer that before Rudy Gobert got traded, the Nets wanted Cat, Anthony Edwards, and I think 4 first-round picks.
And that would have been highway robbery by the Brooklyn Nets.
Yes.
If you got, I would consider an Ant Edwards picks trade straight up. Ant Edwards and a bunch of first round picks straight up at this point. Because I think Anthony Edwards has shown huge potential, and I know I'm going to get a lot of heat on this, but you're trading away Kevin Durant, who doesn't want to really be on your squad, and you're able to get Anthony Edwards, former first-round pick, and you throw in like 4 or 5 first-round picks along with Anthony Edwards and a couple other pieces. I think it's the start of a trade discussion. I really do. I think any trade surrounding a guy like Ant Edwards, a guy like John Morant, I know it's not going to happen, but I think like those type of guys that are like young and can like kind of show explosiveness. I know John Morant's a better player than Anthony Edwards, but it was just an example I was giving. It's a start of a trade discussion. It's a start.
I think so.
The fact that you were like, oh, let's throw in Cat in there. I'm like, okay, this is like, I mean, you could run it back. You could run it with Cat and Edwards and kind of compete in the East for an 8 seed, just like you had last year. If we're going to be completely honest, but I don't know. I think Brooklyn's going to be in a very unique situation where we really won't know what to look at until this trade's done. Well, we really can't analyze the whole scenario until we see what they get back.
Because I think every team in the NBA, there's 29 teams in the NBA that probably want Kevin Durant right now.
I think all 30 teams in the NBA want Kevin Durant right now.
Oh, yes, all 30 teams in the NBA.
I think everyone. Right, I think it's interesting to look
32.
at.
It's 16 teams in each conference.
Yeah.
So 31 teams, all 32, but 31 teams have done their due diligence to check in on Kevin Durant. I think maybe 5 have an actual like viable shot of getting him based on, salary, the assets they have on their roster.
So 30 teams in the NBA.
30?
30. I'm just doing, making sure you got that right.
30.
30, yes.
Okay, I was right.
Yes. Okay, you're right the first time.
So only like 4 or 5 teams actually have a viable shot of getting Kevin Durant just based on their roster composition at the moment. And I think a trade cannot get done because there is nothing of value that is worth Kevin Durant.
The hardest part is that you're going to look at it and you're going to see Kevin Durant getting moved, and it's got to be to a team he wants to go to, and the return has to be the right return. And obviously, he's not going to want to go to a team that the return is going to be huge for, that he's going to have to go to a team and kind of rebuild that team from start up.
Which is why I don't think it's going to happen.
Unless it's an ideal situation or an ideal place that he wants to play in, and he wants to build his own team again. And he wants to start it up like he did with Brooklyn. He's going to sign there. He's going to bring some pieces along with him, and he's going to run it back. But I feel as though it's too late in the offseason to say, let's go build a squad. Because a lot of free agents have signed. A lot of guys are not just available. So I don't know if this is a move necessarily that you make this year or you make next year. Like if you were to bounce from the team, at least wait for a year when there's free agents available so you could build a squad. I mean, the best free agent available was Bradley Beal at this point. He already signed his max contract. So it's like, all right, what are you going to do here? I don't know.
Yeah. And then we have to talk about Kyrie, too. I guess Kyrie's on the move, too. The only option for him is the Lakers. He's the only option.
If he gets moved, he's going to Lakers. And I don't know what your return's going to look like there. It's going to be Russ Westbrook.
Westbrook, THT, and a pick?
I think that's your deal. And
then you have to throw in Joe Harris, the match contracts, because Westbrook makes more than Kyrie.
But I think in that scenario, losing Joe Harris is kind of a solid move for the Nets in an odd way.
Because he is getting paid a lot.
His contract's kind of large, and if you're not looking to compete, that's the thing. Like, are you if you bring Russ in, right? You got him. Are you still moving KD? In this hypothetical situation that we move Kyrie, because Kyrie's out the door, is KD and Russ play one more season together? I would love to see it in Brooklyn. I think it would work out again. I think it'd just be exciting. Honestly,
the thought is though if Russ comes to Brooklyn, he's not playing a single game in Brooklyn.
You think they buy him out immediately? Because there's no trade partner for him unless I believe it was Charlotte was the team that inquired about him in LA.
Then you want to get Gordon Hayward back, and where did that bring you?
That's the thing. Like you trade Russ, like you're trading a bad contract for another bad contract, and it's to the point. Like I would rather see what Russell Westbrook can do in Brooklyn than
Gordon Hayward.
Bring in Gordon Hayward, who we know okay, he had some success in Charlotte, but I just think Russell Westbrook's the better player.
I think if Kyrie gets moved, I think that's the beginning of the end.
For KD in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
I think Kyrie's out the door. I think there's not a doubt in my mind Kyrie does not play in Brooklyn next year.
I don't know.
I also think it's going to be one of those things. It's going to be like the Isaiah Thomas trade. It's going to be like, okay, like there's going to be rumblings about like a rumor, and then one night it's just going to be like, oh, the Nets and Lakers are in deep talks, trade's done. And I think it's going to be one of those things like, okay, it's going to be Russ Westbrook. I think that's honestly the trade. It's gonna be the trade. It's gonna be Russ, a THT, first round pick, and then for Joe Harris and Kyrie. And I think that's the end of the trade. And I think the Nets want, from what I read, the Nets want more pieces. They want outside another team to kind of bring in. So maybe they get a team like Charlotte involved,
and they don't touch Russ.
They don't touch Russ. Nets get Gordon Hayward, a couple first round picks from Charlotte, a first round pick from the Lakers, and that's your trade. And Joe Harris goes to the Lakers, and Kyrie goes to the Lakers, or Joe Harris goes someone else. I mean, we could potentially have two of the biggest trades in NBA history happening this offseason. Between Kyrie Irving getting moved for a second time in his career, and then KD. I mean, the Kyrie trade's going to have to involve a bunch of teams if Los Angeles is getting Kyrie and trading Russell Westbrook. Because we could see like a 4-team trade like that. It can get crazy. But KD is going to be the most interesting trade in NBA history because it's going to be the best player in NBA history being traded. Well, one of the best players in NBA history getting traded. The best player to ever get traded in NBA history, I would imagine.
Probably, I think Kareem got traded. He was probably the best player to ever get traded.
Well, it's going to be KD.
You think KD's going to be better than Kareem?
KD's probably the best player to ever get traded, if he gets traded.
So he's better than Kareem?
I wouldn't necessarily say that.
Kareem got traded.
He did, but I think it's a different time. Like, it's a different time.
All right.
I just think like there was never like really a time in the NBA where like Kevin Durant type player is just available for trade.
And I think going off of that, like he's such a great player. You know, people have him as top 15. I don't know if these, the last few weeks, the last few months really changed anything for some people, but he's an all-time great. You're just trying to imagine what a trade package looks like for him, and then we see what's happening already this offseason. You saw DeJounte Murray get traded from San Antonio to Atlanta. 3 first-round picks were involved. And Danilo Gallinari, I mean, he got waived. And then you look at the Rudy Gobert trade, where if you look at it from a surface level, 5 first-round picks were essentially involved in that trade.
So it's 4 first-round picks.
Plus their first-round pick.
Swap. So the Jazz will receive Malik Beasley, Patrick Beverley, Walker Kessler, first-round pick, Jared Vanderbilt, and 4 first-round picks. So they're unprotected picks in 2023, 2025, 2027, swaps in 2026, and a top 4 protected pick in 2029. It's important to note that Rudy Gobert is 30 years old. He's a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year.
He has one of the biggest contracts in basketball.
He averaged 15 and 14 last season. And he signed through the max deal through 2025. He has a player option in 2026. If you're the Minnesota Timberwolves, I give this trade a D.
I think it's an F, personally.
The only reason why I don't give it an F is I want to see how it plays out. I think if it plays out and the Timberwolves are competitive in the Western Conference, I think I'm willing to give it a higher grade. The initial reaction is an F. 4 first-round picks.
I count it as 5. The guy you just drafted,
5 first-round picks. Yeah. You have Jared Vanderbilt. You have Patrick Beverley. You have Malik Beasley. The guys that played well for you last season, just shipped them away. Guys that kind of built this culture in Minnesota that the new owners were trying to build. So put so much effort into building. And it's like, oh, yeah, you got like Rudy Gobert, who's one of the best defensive players of all time. I mean, some may say Hall of Fame projections there. I don't know. He
is a Hall of Famer. He's a Hall of Famer.
He's getting close. I mean, the resume is definitely getting there.
Didn't Ben Wallace make the Hall of Fame? He's making the Hall of Fame.
I mean, he's only 30.
He's making the Hall of Fame.
He's got a couple solid years left on him.
I bet the house that he makes Hall of Fame.
So, okay, 5 first-round picks.
Is he better than Chris Bosh?
I don't know. The man started COVID in the NBA.
Anyway,
3-time Defensive Player of the Year, though. That talks. That speaks. That speaks volumes about how great he is.
I just think that
it's just tough because I feel like
he was on such a big deal too.
The contract was one of the worst contracts in the NBA.
And who are you bidding against that you had to give up 5 first-round? Was someone willing to give up 4 first-round picks?
I would have gave up 2 if you gave up 2 first-round picks in that package,
and maybe maybe a player.
No, I mean, let's say
you have to match.
Let's you give the players that they gave up and 2 first-round picks.
I don't think it's that bad.
I think it's a B.
Are you saying? Wait, are we saying 2 first-round picks, including the guy they drafted, or
Yes.
are we saying
no 2 first-round picks and all the guys they traded in that trade?
All right, so I count that as 3.
So count it as 3 then. I still think it's not a terrible trade. I think it's the fact that you mortgage the future for now. You have 2 big men playing on the same court. Like Rudy Gobert can't shoot at all. So
I mean, Cat, some argue, is one of the best 3-point shooters.
Yes, Cat's one of the best. Yeah, Cat's one of the best 3-point shooters in the league. Period. And he definitely are up there in terms of big men. But I'm just saying, you have Rudy Gobert, great defender, can't spread the floor, and you're gonna trust Cat play power forward. It's a lot to ask for a guy that big, and you're just banking on 2 big guys staying healthy all year, and then you look at the playoffs and you're like, all right, let's compete there, I guess. You still have deloading, who's still loading, in my opinion. I'm trying to see him kind of break out. He had that one All-Star game in Brooklyn, but that was like, all right, maybe he's back to Brooklyn next year.
I don't know. Hey, if you ask for Ant and D'Lo with the picks instead of Cat, I think the trade gets done.
The team's solid, though, in Minnesota. You still have D'Lo. You still have Anthony Edwards. Then you have Gobert. You have Cat.
I mean, but trading, having no protection over those picks until 2027.
That's my only issue, because it's like...
That's 5 years away. The
like,
NBA is so different in 5 years.
It's not only that. It's the contract that bothers me. Like, the contract is one of those contracts that, like, it's a lot of... Like, he's a good player. He's a good player. He would start on, like, 90-something% of the teams, I would say.
Honestly, probably... I need a team that doesn't have Jokic or Embiid.
That's what I'm saying, like 90-something% of the teams. Yeah. But it's just like the money's just insane for what he's going to get paid in his mid-30s. I just pulled it up. His player option is player option 2026. So we got 4 years from now. He'd be 34 years old.
That's just... I felt like it was one of those contracts where it's like he gets moved and the contract itself makes it so you have to give up less compensation.
Honestly.
So like if you were on a good deal, imagine what the compensation back in return would have been.
It's probably the same. I think honestly this is the max compensation you get for Rudy Gobert.
Well, so like it goes back. So like DeJounte Murray gets 3 picks. Rudy Gobert gets 4 and a recently drafted player.
No, well, 4 and a swap too. So it's like 5 and then plus the player.
So 6.
No, wait. In top 4. So they got the 2023, 25, 27, 26, and 29.
That's 5.
Yeah, so unprotected first in 23, 25, 27, pick swap 26, and top 4 protected 29. So it's 4 picks and a pick swap.
You're trading picks in 2029 for a player who's making that much money?
How old is 2029? So they'll be 18 in 2029. So what are they right now? So they'll be
12, 11?
Yeah, 11, yeah.
You're trading 11-year-old for Rudy Gobert.
They're 6th graders. You're trading 6th graders for Rudy Gobert. That's crazy to think about. But
so if 5 picks goes for Rudy Gobert with that all the players involved.
Once Rudy Gobert got traded for 5 picks, I think the Brooklyn Sean Marks just looked at the table and he was just like,
I texted my friend. I was like, Jesus Christ has to be reincarnated and then traded for Kevin Durant in return at this rate.
If you're Sean Marks, you're just smiling at this point because you're like, if KD comes to your office and it's like, how come you didn't trade me yet? You're like, dude, name a team that has 5 first-round picks.
And I'm sending you there. They're yours.
Give me 5 first-round picks and players that are better. Because the argument's going to come down to is like, do you think you're a better player than Rudy Gobert? Of course I do. If you're Kevin Durant. Okay, name a team that's only going to be 5 first-round picks and the players better than the players we got there and you have a deal. Name it. It's going to be
like if you get Bridges, Ayton,
and 5 first-round picks.
Crowder, and then 5 first-round picks.
Crowder would have to be a sign trade because is he not a free agent?
He might be. I just threw a random role player in there.
He might. Is he?
Or Cam Johnson. I think that's a guy that gets thrown into these mock trades. It's just that just like it kind of screwed up front offices for the rest of the league. I think I don't know what it is with Danny Ainge. Danny Ainge, GM of the Jazz. He just has a knack of getting such ridiculous trade packages for like
Jay Crowder's
nothing.
Back with he's still in the Suns. I don't know. Maybe they were trying to move. I don't know. Danny Ainge, Danny Ainge strikes again, and I saw that on Twitter, and I was like, I completely forgot Danny Ainge was in Utah.
He has blackmail on someone.
He has two of the greatest hauls in NBA history.
He has naked pictures on someone.
The fact that he was able to get off Gobert's contract is insane to me. The fact that he got the haul that he got back, and it's just like, all right.
And now you have the option of what is like if you trade Donovan Mitchell goes for more than that.
Well, you have you're in a unique situation in which that you traded Rudy Gobert, you have 5 first-round picks. Now it's like, okay, if you're Donovan Mitchell, you can move Donovan Mitchell and get more picks, or use the picks now to acquire assets to build around Donovan Mitchell. Because it was obvious that the duo of Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert was not going to work.
Yeah.
And you still have other guys around that you can move to acquire more assets. You still have Mike Conley. You still have Bogdanovich. It's like, all right, you want to move. I think Bogey goes for a couple picks. I think.
Well,
maybe not an eye for
Royce O'Neal goes for a pick, for a first round pick. That was ridiculous. Brooklyn Nets, Sean Marks. I don't know what that was about. And then Rudy so I don't know. Are we in a time now where first round picks are just so devalued? It has inflation hit the trade market, the trade market.
I just think if you're NBA teams, they realize like the amount of guys that get picked in the first round that don't really pan out is a lot. To the point that it's like, okay, if you have a late first round pick like the Boston Celtics did, let's bring in Malcolm Brogdon. You pay him, but it's like, all right, at least you got a proven guy that you kind of know what to expect. And if it doesn't work, you can always kind of ship him out and get a second round. Like it's like you can get something for him at the end of the day, or just end up paying his contract and that's it. Because you look at that, especially when you're the Boston Celtics, you had a consecutive like year after year after year after year that you were like drafting in the first round. You had R.J. Hunter, you had Yabusele, you had I can throw names out there for days, and it's just like, all right.
The guy Young.
James Young?
James Young.
We're young and smart.
Yeah.
But it's just like, all right, you drafted, that's what I named 3 first-round picks right there?
All busts. Always.
None of them pan out?
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, what do you, like, you could have traded those first-round picks and got experienced bench players that would have helped you and elevated you to that next level. I think now teams are realizing, okay, if I have a late first round pick, I can move that for an established NBA wing and a league that's 3-D, and it's like, all right, let's compete. Or he'll give us some solid bench minutes, and if we don't want him in a couple years, we'll just ship him away for a bag of chips, or we just pay out his contract and let him walk in free agency.
I mean, like, what would you consider a success? Like at the late, like Peyton Pritchard was a late round pick, first round pick. I would say he's a pretty successful late first round pick because he's getting, you know, rotational minutes in meaningful basketball games. No, but would you agree?
Yeah. Peyton Pritchard.
I don't think any team in the NBA would lose sleep losing a guy like Peyton Pritchard if they're getting a solid, proven guy in return. And like, how often does a guy like Jimmy Butler get drafted like in the first round that late? Like, very rarely does a guy get drafted that great.
But you
on the second half of the first round.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's tough to like get Jokic. You get like Isaiah Thomas in the second round. You get
Draymond Green, second round pick.
Yeah, like that's what I'm saying. Like it's tough. It's not easy. So it's like, okay, let's get established guys, especially when you're not sure. Like if you don't have a committed guy, like, okay, if this guy's available in the second round, we're going to go after it. We're getting after it.
Yeah.
It's so hard to the point. It's like, okay, let's trade, especially if you want to compete now. The first round picks aren't going to do much. Like you're kind of like building for it's like so look at the Warriors situation too. It's like you have the future is coming, and it's like these guys are still competing for NBA titles. So you're in that weird dynamic where it's like you're kind of building while the other guys are kind of leaving, but at the same time you're gonna have to pay these guys while these guys are still getting paid. So that's why I think the KD situation is a perfect solution to that problem, because you won't have to pay the young guys on your roster, and you'll be able to bring in Kevin Durant, and it's kind of like, okay, who's stopping that team again? Yeah,
but then people are like, oh, well, you're kind of mortgaging your future for the next 3-4 years. And I'm like, yes, if you can win 4 finals in a row, I'd sacrifice 10 years of winless basketball.
I don't think people realize how hard it is to win a championship in professional sports. You will mortgage. I had this argument recently with a kid that I work with, and I said, I would mortgage the next 10 years of my team's future for one championship in any sport.
100%.
And he said, no, I would not.
How do you not say
And
yes
and it was funny because I was sitting with my friend, a mutual friend of ours, Mike, shout out. He was like, I'm a Knicks fan. I'm a New York sports fan. I haven't seen a championship in so long. It's like to the point that, yes, I would do that in a heartbeat. And I was like, to be honest, it's amazing that fans of sports teams go their whole lives without seeing a championship.
Yes, I mean,
like they'll go lifetimes without seeing a championship because you have like one team dominate the decade.
Exactly.
And it's like, okay, like the Golden State Warriors were like the team that dominated the teens or the tens or whatever you want to call it, and then you had like LeBron who just dominates every decade he's in. So I was like, yes, 100%, yes. I would trade every draft pick, and I was like, even the NFL, like I would trade all 7-round draft picks for the next. I would trade 70 picks for one championship.
Well, the Rams literally just did that, and they won a Super Bowl. As a Dallas Cowboys fan, I would love nothing more than seeing that happen.
That's why I was like the Boston Celtics making the finals. It's like it was almost surreal. I guess it was like Paulo when he saw the Bengals. It's like they're in it to compete. Yeah. I feel like the NFL is different. The NFL is like your team gets like. You get the one championship game, your team gets lucky, they win that game, and it's like, okay, you're done. Like, that's crazy. The Boston Celtics, I was like, it's 7 games. This is going to be tough. Like, I was like, this is going to be a rough go. And then it went up, and I was like, oh, like, we have a shot. Like, I was like, oh, this is crazy. And then, like, I slowly just saw it crumbling apart, and I was like, Jordan Poole was hitting shots, like those crazy, like before the buzzer
Steph
shots.
was pointing at his finger.
When Steph
was so cool.
Steph at the good night, I was in bed. I was like, I'm crying my eyes out.
I actually went to bed. I listened to him.
It was actually funny because my one friend texted me and they were like, oh, like, are you okay? And I was like,
what, someone die?
No, but they were just like, are you upset? And I was like, to be honest, I'm not too upset because I was like, going into it, I knew the Warriors were going to win. Like, I was like, I thought every round, I was like, okay, the Celtics are going to be, I didn't think they were going to be the Nets first round. Like, everybody on the pod, I was like, all right, I don't think they're beating the Nets. And then they were like, we would text Carmine, and Carmine's like, I think they're going to beat the Bucks. And I was like, I don't think they're going to beat Giannis. I was like, Giannis is a beast. And then we would play the Miami Heat, and I was like, the Miami Heat, the only one, I was like, I think we have a shot. Like, I was like, I don't think Miami's that good. And then there we are. We're in the finals. And I was like, all right, yeah, the Warriors are winning. And I said in the podcast, I was like, it might not. I was like, it's going to be over in 5, but I could see it going to 6. And it went exactly the way I thought it would go. And I did say, I was like, oh, the Boston Celtics are going to take an early lead in the series. And everyone's going to be like, oh, Boston has a shot to win it. And the Golden State Warriors are going to be like, you know what? We have the best player. We have one of the best players of all time. The Mount Rushmore, that is Steph Curry.
Mount Rushmore.
He's on my Mount Rushmore. In terms of revolutionizing the game, I think Steph Curry's...
Probably, yeah.
I think Steph Curry's impact on the game is one that we won't be able to recognize until long after it's done.
No, I think
it's already
it's pretty,
you're starting to recognize it now,
now,
but it's like after you're gonna look like 10, 20 years from now, and you're gonna be like, wow, like Steph Curry really changed the game of basketball forever.
He did. I mean, there are guys who cannot play in the NBA now who are borderline all-stars before he took off.
You look at it and you're like, the first things they teach you when you go to like play basketball now is like how to shoot.
Yeah.
Especially like as you get older and you get taller, like big men have to be able to shoot in perimeter defense because now everyone's shooting. So it's like, okay, like the 3-and-D really got big because now everyone's realizing the 3-point shot's worth more than the 2-point shot. I don't know what took so long to realize that, but now it's like, okay.
I mean, mid-range 2 is like not like even relevant anymore.
Yeah, I know.
It's like layups are.
Well,
threes.
I mean, that's also an analytics thing, which is like a basic fact that a long range 2 is a harder shot to make.
It's the least efficient shot.
Yeah, if you take 2 steps back and you start practicing that shot from 3 and you make a slightly lower percentage, you still score more points over the season.
Yeah.
Just because the 3-point shot is worth more than the 2-point shot. And again, I don't know what took so long for people to realize that, but it's like, all right, this is pretty cool now. I get you.
Basic math finally came into sports, and baseball has too much of it, basketball not enough.
So yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like Steph Curry is like, all right, like what he's done for the game has been insane.
Yeah.
And I think that he's really like one of the GOATs. But anyway, that was Rudy Gobert discussion, I guess. I don't know how really far that went off. But I'm going D. I want to see what they do. I don't know if they're definitely going to be they got to be better. Like I think the roster got better.
I can honestly see them being a top 5-4 seed in the Western Conference.
Like, I understand you lose Vanderbilt, you lose Patrick Beverly, but it's like Gobert's an all-star. Like, he's the defensive player of the year. Like, let's not act like he's a bad player.
I think the Timberwolves are going to be much improved, but I think their ceiling is not much more than a second-round exit. And at the end of the day, it's like, do you trade all of that for a guy who doesn't really, completely? But
I don't know. I don't know.
Second round
exit. Who are you putting above them?
Golden State,
Yes.
probably Memphis.
Memphis is gonna be interesting.
Healthy Clippers team,
Again, interesting.
healthy Denver team.
And then you also have to put the Mavericks there too, right?
They could be neck and neck with Dallas.
I think it's gonna be interesting. I think a move like this is a move that you have to make when you're ready to compete for a championship right now, and I just don't know if Minnesota's ready to compete.
Do they have a guy that you think, okay, he can take over a playoff series? But I feel like you need to have that kind of guy.
I think they're banking on it.
Anthony Edwards.
Being Anthony Edwards.
If Anthony Edwards takes a step up, I can,
And I'm not saying that
words.
I'm not saying that to like diss Cat. I just don't know if Cat it can.
He doesn't have that dog in him. He's a cat. Anyways.
He's got that dog in him. All right, let's look. I'm off it now. I don't know. I'm right. I'm excited to look back on this podcast next NBA offseason. You're like,
now,
did I compete?
That was probably the worst. I think, in my opinion, the worst offseason move in terms of for Minnesota's front office. I also was not a huge fan of Bradley Beal getting the contract that he did, and we're kind of talking about that.
Segues, baby, segue.
We're kind of talking about that a little bit the other day. Off pod, off the air, but he's one of the highest paid players in the NBA now.
Facts.
Only no trade clause in the NBA. LeBron doesn't have that. Kevin Durant doesn't have that. So we're talking before, like Kevin Durant, you kind of have to trade him to a team that he wants to go to.
Bradley Beal, you have to.
You have to trade him to a team he has to go to. He's going to be in his mid-30s, being one of the highest paid players in the NBA. I think he gets over $50 million a year.
It's a 5-year, $251 million max extension with the team, locking up one of the summer's biggest free agents to the long haul.
He's going to be age 34, 35, making $50 million a year.
He's the second longest tenured player in franchise history.
Yeah, who's number one?
Wes Unseld, who spent 13 years there.
That's crazy.
Bradley Beal has 10 years there currently.
Bradley
Beal is arguably one of the best franchise players in Wizards history.
Yes.
If he plays out the rest of his contract, he'll finish with the most points and minutes and games.
But let's put this in perspective, right? I think we overvalue this whole loyalty thing. Like, oh, Bradley Beal is just so loyal. He's so loyal. He's not loyal. He knew he was going to get a bag from this team if he played his cards right, and he did exactly that. He got a bag. Let's not get it twisted. Same thing with Damian Lillard. Oh, I'm loyal. He's getting $60 million a year now with this new extension. How loyal is he really? Let's put this in let's think about that.
No, Dame Lillard has been pretty loyal. I mean, I think the franchise just makes like move after move after move. It's just like what, like they were able to compete with like young Dame, and then they kind of blew that roster up, and then Dame went through the rebuild, and like they traded TJ McCollum now, and it's like, all right, like what is this man? This man could easily request out. Like he just doesn't. Going back to Bradley Beal though, I'm looking at it right now. So Bradley Beal's $43.3 million base salary next season will make him the league's 5th highest paid player, running slightly behind LeBron James and Kevin Durant. Keep in mind, Bradley Beal has only made 3 All-Star games in his career and made the All-NBA third team in 2021. LeBron James and Kevin Durant have combined for 30 All-Star game selections and 28 All-NBA selections. Bradley Beal makes more money and slightly in front of Giannis Antetokounmpo and Kawhi Leonard, who have combined for 11 All-Star game appearances and 11 All-NBA selections.
I think
Beal is slated to make $57 million in the 26-27 season.
$56 million. He's going to be like mid-30s, making $60 million a year. My take, he is a fringe top 15 player in the NBA. Fringe.
He's getting top 5 player in the NBA money, and if you look at his win above replacement over the past 3 seasons, he should be earning money that is closer to the likes of Bogdan Bogdanovic, Jarrett Allen, and Jonas Valanciunas. And that is according to Raptors War. So that is an interesting stat right there.
You know what? Here's my take. Takes, no suits. Bradley Beal is no better than Jaylen Brown. I say on this podcast all the time, the Celtics cannot go anywhere if Jaylen Brown's the best player on the team. You need a Jason Tatum. The Wizards are going to be absolutely irrelevant as long as Bradley Beal is the best player on that team. You need a number one option. He's a glorified number two.
It's tough because Bradley Beal has never really had John Wall is the best teammate he's ever had.
Yes.
And it's like, I wouldn't say John Wall is necessarily like a great NBA player.
At his peak, he had that dog in him. He had that dog in him.
I'm looking at their
he was a wildcat. He had that dog in him.
I'm looking at their wins above replacements. It's pretty bad in terms of wins above replacements. John Wall is the best player he's ever played with. Behind, okay, then after that's Marcin Gortat, Otto Porter, Nene, Trevor Ariza. Together, those players I just named have made 5 All-Star games and 1 NBA team, and all those are by John Wall.
I just think this. I think you had so many trade packages on the table for a guy like Bradley Beal, and instead what you do is you give him a massive contract, which knocks out a bunch of teams from affording him or making it more difficult for him to be traded. Yep. And then on top of that, making $60 million at 35 isn't enough. You give him a no trade clause. The only guy in the league who has a no trade clause. He's untradeable. You cannot trade him now.
But you also have to understand that if you're a team like the Washington Wizards, you have to sign guys like this because no one comes to play with you.
Or you play it smart and you do something like what OKC is doing and you trade guys for picks and you just have a whole stockpile of picks.
I think they could have easily signed and traded Bradley Beal.
I think they should have. He's not that good to be getting the money he's getting.
He's not bad.
He isn't bad. But I don't think he's a top 15 player in the NBA. And he's making top 5 player in the NBA money. Let's just not be ridiculous here and give a guy money just for the sake of giving him money.
I don't know.
To say a guy, yes, I think he led the league in scoring in 2021. Yeah, you saw who was on his team. He's taking every shot in the world. Points per game don't mean anything if you're the best player on your team.
And on a garbage team. They also have Kristaps Porzingis contract.
Yeah,
they're gonna be their top 10 in duos in terms of salary. I think they're like number 6 or something. But I don't know. It's just the way the contract's structured. By the time they get like a lot of the salary that they have on their books off it, Bradley Beal is going to be over 30 years old. I think Bradley Beal is definitely a solid NBA player. It comes down to the money.
Yes.
Like that's what your issue is. Your issue is just like you don't think he's worth the money.
I don't think it's even that. Who in the world turns down a $250 million contract that you have to throw in a no trade clause?
Yeah, I mean you can't blame Bradley Beal. Like Bradley Beal's not our fault.
Him.
Like
I think the Washington's front office is incompetent. Like what are you doing? I think you're just flipping for assets. Or you sign him, don't give him the no trade clause. I don't know. Now you can't flip him at all.
You could flip him, but you just you need his permission first. Which, if you're that bad, you're going to get his permission.
Yeah, but then he's going to be like, I want to go to one of the best teams in the NBA, and they're going to get him for pennies on the dollar.
Which you can make the move for.
But you're going to get pennies on the dollar for what he's worth.
And there's also, I think there's something about they owe him money for a trade. You know, there's like the trade exception, something that if he's traded, they owe him like a certain amount of money. I think that's also in the contract. But
it's just so ridiculous.
It's going to be interesting because like Bradley Beal has said in the past that he wants to compete for championships, and it's like you're going back to Washington, and I do not believe they have any shot of winning a championship in the near future because Kristaps Porzingis is not good enough to be the second best option on your team and win a championship. The other players around there in Washington aren't good enough to be a supporting cast for Bradley Beal and Kristaps Porzingis, and I think when it comes down to it, we both kind of have the same idea that Bradley Beal is not the guy on a championship team.
He's not. Like, you're stuck now until 2027 building around him if you want to have any championship aspirations. Let's be real. I say this all the time. Everyone's like, oh, this guy's a top 10 player in the NBA, this top 5 player in the NBA. There's only 10 spots or 5 spots in the top 5, top 10.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a guy that's that guy who's a top 5, top 10 player in the NBA, I think you tear it down and you look at the draft to find a guy who will be a top 10 player, or you get the assets to move for a guy like Kevin Durant when he's available and just get a guy who's going to be a Hall of Famer. You have to get a guy that's that great on your team if you actually want to win. Like, put two and two together. Like there's only so many. Like the only way to win a championship in the NBA is if you have a great player. There's only so many great players.
Look at the Raptors. Raptors. They compared this signing to when the Raptors had DeMar DeRozan, and they're like, sometimes you have to trade that franchise guy to bring in to win a championship. And I know like there's no Kawhi Leonard available right now, but I'm sure Kevin Durant. But I'm sure that there's going to be an opportunity, and now you have no trade clause, so it's kind of like you're definitely handcuffed. Whereas Kawhi was traded to the Toronto Raptors, and it's like, all right, like he didn't want to go to Toronto, but he had no say.
Yeah.
I think it was pretty evident that he didn't want to go to Toronto. I mean, he bailed as soon as he could have. Did everything he could have for the city. He's a top 5 Raptor all time. In his one season he spent there, rightfully so. But you saw it as soon as he had the opportunity. He went to LA. That's where he always wanted to go. I mean, might have went to the wrong LA team, but we'll save that for another pod. We'll see. I think Bradley Beal. It's going to be interesting because they're not going to be able to compete with the roster that they have now. And now they're committing so much money to Bradley Beal. It's just like, I understand the salary cap's going to go up. And I understand that these guys are going to get the money that they're going to get. And I know in like 5 years, we're going to look back and like, oh, it's not that much money, because that's what we always did when we see these huge contracts. It's just the way it's just the way sports work. Yeah,
and from that point, I think 5 years ago, the highest paid player in the NBA, I think, was Mike Conley, when he got that huge deal from Memphis before he got traded to Utah.
And now you're like, oh.
He's like, he's an afterthought now. But it's like the no trade clause, guys like Steph Curry. The Warriors turned Steph Curry down when he wanted no trade clause for his contract. They didn't give it to him.
Because it handcuffs you so much.
Yes. I mean, you always, Steph Curry is first ballot Hall of Famer, probably top 2 point guard all time. And to say like, you don't deserve a trade clause, how does Bradley Beal get that? That's insane.
I mean, you're the Wizards. You have to do it. You're a small market team. You're a small market team.
Is Washington, D.C. a small market?
I mean, I would say, when was the last big free agent they signed?
Because the front office is clearly incompetent.
I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know.
I mean, we've seen like...
I can't name the last big free agent Washington has signed.
We've seen OKC sign Paul George when he re-signed. I mean, like, small markets get big name players.
It depends, because I feel like players want to play with other players.
Like Cleveland had
Paul George wanted those big name players.
Cleveland put a team around LeBron. I guess they were just lucky that he was a hometown kid. But
they put a team around LeBron. That just proves my point I just made. They want to play with the star player. They'll go to any destination if they want to play with stars.
That's what I'm saying. If you trade for a guy if you trade for a star, the team gets built around it if you have a competent front office.
But also, I feel as though Bradley Beal is a guy that's liked by many other NBA players.
No one wants to play with him. Why? They know he can't be the best player.
I mean, has anyone really had the opportunity to go to Washington? Like, name a player that's gotten moved in the past few years that had an opportunity to go to Washington. Like, the big names that have gotten moved for packages that Washington couldn't even compete with.
Yeah.
Like, the only name that really comes to mind in terms of trades is like Paul George. Like, the Clippers gave up a haul for him. It was like, all right. And that's also because he wanted to play with Kawhi Leonard. And it's like, all right, Kawhi Leonard is definitely a better player than Bradley Beal. But I don't know any other players in the NBA that are like, oh, like they're on the move or about to get moved besides Kevin Durant. But we know the Washington Wizards have no package that's even going to be remotely close to what any other team in the NBA can offer for Kevin Durant. So now we're back to square one.
Yeah, I just know that the Wizards are going to be, 8th seed at best for the next 5 years. That's all it comes down to.
Yeah, I agree. Until this roster changes dramatically, I think the Washington Wizards are competing for the middle of the pack, that 8 seed play-in tournament, because they got nothing. Yeah. They got nothing. They got Bradley Beal, and that's about it.
Bradley Beal hasn't done like much for them. Like you said, he's gonna be an all-time great Wizard. It's like
you have 3 All-Star appearances and 1 All-NBA team to show for it. John Wall has 5.
They're perennially a bottom feeder of the league, where they're in the lottery pretty much every other year.
And he's had like Russ. Everyone forgets Russ played 1 year in DC.
Yeah, I forgot about that too.
And it's like, I mean, it's a forgot because Russ has jumped from like he's gonna be on his like 5th team in 5 years if he gets moved again.
I guess we can't dismiss Kuzma.
I mean, I could. All right. Let's talk about Kyle Kuzma. What is there to talk about?
I don't know.
Exactly.
Kuz maybe he's the answer. Maybe he's that first option.
Dude.
Maybe he breaks the Kardashian curse and he takes him to the promised land. Who knows?
I don't know about that. Anyway, I'm kind of off this Washington Wizards talk because it's over. It's done. Bradley Beal got his money.
They've gotten too much attention on this pod. Much more attention than they should have.
I mean, that's probably one of the first times we're probably talking about them in a while. Maybe ever.
Wizards? Who talks to the Wizards?
I think if you're the Washington Wizards, you have to make this move.
Yeah.
Again, not like I'm saying it. Like it for the franchise as a whole, I think it's a smart move.
I don't.
You have to keep him. What are you going to do? You going to trade him?
But
the only other option was to trade him. Who wants him? Who's going to give you a package for him?
If you give him $260 million, no one's going to match that. Just don't put the trade clause in.
Your issue is just with the trade clause.
That's your only issue. Stupid.
That's the only issue.
When you see he's the only player in the NBA to have it, and he's not a top 15 player in the NBA, and he's making the money he's already making, that's insane.
Shout out to him, honestly.
He finessed. He really did.
Good for him. Like, I don't know.
No, great for him. Get that bag. You know, some people see the NBA as a business, as Kendrick Perkins says. And he's seeing it as a business. He's getting his bag. He's a businessman. He's not a businessman. He's a businessman.
Anyway, we're over an hour into this podcast.
Yeah, I think we pretty much touched on everything.
It's getting late. The boys are getting tired.
Yeah.
All right, so let's wrap it up. If you're not following us on social media, be sure to follow us, Attitudes and Takes, wherever you get your content. We're on all those platforms. SusanTakes.com, articles. Listen to all the previous episodes, Spotify, Apple, Google, wherever you listen to. We're on there. I don't think I'm missing out on anything else. If you have to find anything else, Linktree in the bio of all the social medias, Linktree in the bio, the description of the videos. That will take you to whatever you need to find. It's all the good stuff. So once again, this is the boys from Anthony Concoli, from Domenico Concoli. It's been episode 77 of Suits and Takes. Broncos country.
Let's ride. Peace. Wow.
Give him a little second. Let's ride.